To the U.S. Capitol, where the House is about to gavel back in to debate amendments to the $519 billion Defense Department spending bill for fiscal year 2013. Members are expecting a vote on final passage sometime at about 5 Eastern this afternoon. And now live to the House floor.
The House will be in session. Prayer will be offered by our guest chaplain today, the Reverend Jeffrey Baihee, St. John the Baptist Catholic Church, Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Gracious God and Father, we humbly ask that you bestow upon us the gift of humility. Humble us in your sight, our Creator. It's only from you, our God, that the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are derived, not from any king, government, or Congress. Let us always see ourselves as stewards of these rights and the servants of the people created in your image and likeness. Like our founding fathers, we are to protect, ensure, and safeguard those rights. Guard us from the evils of pride and power that place self-interest before the common good. Give us the courage of our convictions and not simply a belief based on convenience. Never let a wishbone replace our backbone, for it is you alone to whom one day we will all be accountable. Give us the courage and strength to serve and care for your people. We ask this through our God and Father. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. And pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Jenkins.
Please join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Cassidy, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was my privilege to invite Father Bahi here today to speak. And Father Bahi is a native of Baton Rouge, ordained a priest at St. Patrick's Church in 1979, with many academic achievements, but he's actually best known for his spiritual stewardship of his parishioners. And you can see this both in this calling and ministry manifest in the opportunities that he has sought and the activities he currently does. Among these, he has worked with Mother Teresa's Church in Calcutta. He currently is the director of Closer Walk Ministries. He's written several books, such as Paved with Souls, speaking about his experience with Mother Teresa and the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta, as well as videos on his experience on mission trips. He's worked in prison systems for the criminally insane. He works with youth, etc., etc., etc. I was struck that his prayer for us reflected his life, one of humility, courage, accountability of God, calling us to service. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Kansas seek recognition?
House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite my strenuous objection, 2 years ago this week, Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Act. 2 years have passed, and only 1/3 of nearly 400 rules are written today. 1/3. And we've already added nearly 9,000 pages of new regulations and $7 billion in compliance cost. By trying to solve a poorly understood financial crisis, Washington created a regulatory nightmare. New agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have slowed the credit lifeline that is vital to the creation and survival of American small businesses. By impeding borrowing, experts predict Dodd-Frank will reduce annual job creation by 4.3%, hindering economic growth. Instead of using crises as excuses to expand our already overreaching government, we should target regulation at the root of the problem and work to protect both consumers and our innovating entrepreneurs. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House, Mr. Speaker, for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Make It in America plan, a series of bills put forth by House Democrats to put America back to work. The 29th District in Texas, we hold job fairs throughout the year to help our constituents find a job and make better lives for themselves and their families. The American public continually cites job creation and economic growth as the top concerns of the nation. The Make It in America plan aims to strengthen the economy, boost the middle class through continuing to grow our manufacturing and energy production sectors, and creating jobs in America. Make It in America focuses on competition, investing in infrastructure, clean energy jobs, increased education, smart tax policies, and smart regulations. Unfortunately, the majority in the 112th Congress has failed to bring these job-creating plans to the floor for a vote and continue to refuse to put forward a comprehensive jobs plan. Congress must focus our legislative priorities to invest in our future, create good middle-class jobs, and increase America's competitiveness around the globe. By creating these jobs for hard-working Americans, the other areas of our economy will be stimulated. I urge the majority to take up these bipartisan bills and help the American people get back to work.
The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed with amendments H.R. 1627, cited as the Honoring Americans, Veterans, and Caring for Camp Lejeune Families Act of 2012, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from West Virginia seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to support the jobs of hundreds of working coal miners in West Virginia and to highlight the misguided actions of the EPA in objecting to the coal permits and coal mining activity. On April 1, 2010, the EPA issued guidance under the Clean Water Act that bypasses the normal process for promulgating water quality standards. It nullifies the water quality standards put into place by our state regulators and our state legislatures. In other words, the EPA has taken over the state's prerogative on water quality. Despite a 2011 federal court decision that rejected the EPA's interpretation of its authority, the regulatory permitting process for surface mining has essentially been halted in the Appalachian region. Hundreds of permits will expire within the next 18 months in West Virginia alone. Failure to act on these permits will lead to the loss of thousands of jobs in West Virginia, and just recently, actually, we have experienced a loss of 1,000 coal mining jobs. The EPA should exercise its permitting and regulatory authority under the Clean Water Act in a manner that considers the impacts on jobs and the economy in West Virginia and other coal mining states. I yield back.
I yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection.
Thanks to the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, corporations can now make unlimited donations without disclosing who they are. The result is a government for hire to the highest bidder. Think about it. Are you a corrupt oil company that hates those annoying safeguards that protect Americans' health but restricts your ability to drill, baby, drill? No problem. Find a candidate that'll turn a blind eye and donate until they win. Or maybe you're a billionaire on Wall Street who leveraged away the savings of the American people for a big paycheck in 2008, but now you're being held back by Wall Street reform. Not to worry, buy a candidate with a super PAC. Nobody needs to know who you even are. Twice this week, the Disclose Act, which would end this madness and provide transparency to who's contributing in elections, has come up in the Senate. And twice this week, Republicans blocked it on a party line vote. Americans should ask the GOP, why?
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Ask Nancy Senn to address the House for 1 minute and 5 seconds.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, massive tax increases loom on our horizon. If Congress doesn't act before January 1st, middle-class families will see a return of the marriage penalty, the AMT, higher rates on capital gains, dividends, estates, and painful tax hikes on income. According to a new study, the President's tax plan would cost us more than 700,000 American jobs. Mr. Speaker, we all hear from our neighborhood businesses back home who say Congress can't raise taxes during a recession and expect the economy to generate new jobs. Yet some of my colleagues seem content to tax anyone who might have enough revenue to hire and then hope the voters blame someone else when it hurts the middle class. Well, I don't care about the blame game. I care about jobs and the economy. Let's stop the tax hikes, extend current rates, and work immediately on effective reforms to lower rates, close loopholes, and promote growth. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to express my shocking disappointment with some Republican members of the other body in opposing the Senate ratification of the Law of the Sea Treaty. The Law of the Sea Treaty ratification is essential to protect American interests. For over 30 years now, the United States Navy, the U.S. Coast Guard, both under Republican and Democratic administrations, former Secretaries of State and U.S. military personnel have been consistent and strong proponents of U.S. joining the Law of the Sea Convention. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta recently said, "Not since we acquired the lands of America West and Alaska have we had such a great opportunity to expand U.S. sovereignty." Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates said, "The law of the sea provides clear guidance on an appropriate use of maritime domain. As the world's major maritime power with the longest coastline, the U.S. has more to gain from legal certainty and public order in the world's oceans than any other country. It has been supported by every president since Ronald Reagan. the time is due for the other body to take leadership role and ratify the law of the sea treaty.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to express my concern regarding the reduction in funding for Army depots and arsenals contained in the Defense Appropriations Bill that we're debating today on the House floor. Army studies have shown that these reductions will have a lasting negative impact on the Army's organic industrial base. I have the privilege of representing the Corpus Christi Army Depot, which is known as the best-kept secret in the Army, saving taxpayers millions of dollars. It costs about $6.7 million to repair a crash-damaged Black Hawk helicopter versus $17 million for a new one. In fiscal year 2011, a record production year, CCAD produced more than $47 million in cost savings for the Army. The depot shares a great relationship with the community, employing over 6,000 civilians, 56% of which are veterans. The Army Depot serves as the world's largest facility for the repair and overhaul of Army aviation helicopters. Without CCAD, the Army would be unable to sustain maximum combat power for the warfighter. I look forward to working with the committee and the chairman to address these concerns and ensuring the Corpus Christi Army Depot and other depots and arsenals continue to play a vital role in maintaining the readiness of our military. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Virgin Islands seek recognition? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the International AIDS Conference less than a week away, I join my colleagues to celebrate the progress we've made in the fight against HIV/AIDS, to honor those who have lost their battle to this disease, and also to remind everyone that we still have much work to do in sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia, but also in the United States, where more than 1 million people, a disproportionate number of whom are people of color, are living with HIV and AIDS today. Blacks and Latinos together account for 64% of all new HIV infections, yet only about 28% of the population. The AIDS case rate among African Americans is nearly 10 times higher than that of whites, and one recent study found that while 2% of all blacks in the U.S. compared to only 0.2% of all whites are HIV positive. In my district, the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is predominantly black and Hispanic, we're extremely hard hit, with the third largest AIDS case rate in the nation. The conference offers all of us an opportunity to reinvigorate our commitment to battling this disease, to reinforce existing relationships and forge new ones with leaders in the fight against HIV and AIDS, and to take significant steps toward making HIV and AIDS a disease of the past. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to recognize the remarkable accomplishments of 6 athletes from Illinois' 14th Congressional District who will represent the United States at the 2012 Olympics in London. Twin brothers Grant and Ross James from DeKalb will both compete as part of the men's 8 rowing team. Track and field athlete Evan Jager of Algonquin will compete in the steeplechase. Anna Lee of Aurora will travel to London as an alternate member of the women's gymnastics team, and Charlie Jane of Elgin will serve as alternate for the equestrian team. Finally, the men's volleyball team will include Sean Rooney, a graduate of Wheaton Warrenville South High School. Each of these men and women are making us so proud as they represent Illinois and the United States this summer. The House of Representatives wishes them the best of luck. I yield back.
Yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, wonders never cease. I picked up The Hill this morning, which is a local newspaper that most people read once in a while, and there was the words of one of the best Republican doctors that ever served in the Congress. Bill Frist has said he's encouraging his Republican colleagues to embrace the insurance exchange, which is central to President Obama's health care plan. He said originally it was a Republican idea. The state insurance exchanges will offer a menu of private insurance plans to pick and choose from for all the required set of minimum benefits to those without employer-sponsored health care insurance. Now, here's a Republican doctor who was majority leader in the Senate. Contrast him to who we have there now. We have 31 times in this body tried to repeal this. And here you have a Republican doctor who was majority leader of the Senate saying we ought to do it. Read it and weep.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Alabama seek recognition? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, President Obama displays his lack of leadership and refuses to take charge in order to avoid the forthcoming devastating ramifications associated with sequester. That's why I enthusiastically agreed to co-sponsor H.R. 5872, the Sequestration Transparency Act of 2012. For months, the House Armed Services Committee has repeatedly asked DOD and OMB for specifics of how sequestration would be implemented and its impact. In response, we have received nothing. Once H.R. 5872 is implemented, the President will be forced to forego his laissez-faire approach to crisis resolution and will be required to report to Congress the details of the administration's plans to implement the budget sequestration cuts. He will be forced to include an estimate of the sequestration percentages and amounts necessary to achieve the reduction for both defense and non-defense categories. Of course, the impact on our military family and their personnel cannot be overstated. Frankly, it's inexcusable that these men and women who sacrifice so much for our nation should suffer through these uncertainties while Senate Democrats in the White House refuse to offer a specific proposal to fix the sequester. As such, I urge Senator Reid to take this bill up immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I come to the House floor to talk about the extraordinary transformation in the city of Buffalo and Buffalo's waterfront. The national publication, The Economist, had declared last week the city of Buffalo is back in business. Buffalo was once an industrial economy and an industrial working waterfront. Today, there's a transformation of public places along the water's edge, attracting some 800,000 people from all over Buffalo and western New York and southern Ontario into the city of Buffalo. There are 425 cultural and arts events. 4 years ago, there were none. Buffalo's last 36 months have been a period of great progress, with tens of millions of dollars of private sector investment following the public investment of infrastructure that has transformed Buffalo's waterfront. The last 36 months have been a period of great progress. The next 36 months are poised to be a period of even greater progress. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the brave firefighters, the Sheriff's Department officials, policemen, first responders who fought the Hyde Park fire near Fort Collins, Colorado, and those who cared so deeply for their neighbors and their communities by providing a helping hand. The Hyde Park fire was the most destructive in the history of northern Colorado, burning over 87,000 acres, destroying 259 homes, and displacing hundreds of families for weeks. At its peak, over 2,000 firefighters, National Guardsmen, law enforcement, and others braved extremely rugged terrain, 100-plus degree temperatures, and high winds to battle this complex and fast-moving fire. In some cases, local volunteer firefighters fought on the fire line for the good of the community, despite knowing that their own homes would likely be burned to the ground. As signs popped up across the Front Range of Colorado thanking those brave men and women for their service, this Congress salutes you. Because of the brave and immense effort of these firefighters, lives were saved, homes were preserved, and generations to come will be able to continue to enjoy some of the most beautiful and majestic forested areas in the country as we work to restore those areas that were lost.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I'm proud to recognize the great and heroic efforts of our firefighters. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute, to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Gail Pennybacher, an award-winning, longtime television journalist who has covered local news in the District, Maryland, and especially Virginia for the ABC Channel 7 news team since 1986. During her time as the Northern Virginia Bureau Chief, Gail has garnered the respect of law enforcement, legislators, and everyday citizens alike. Gail has covered the Capital Region's top stories for the last quarter century, including the September 11th terror attacks, the Beltway sniper shootings, and the Columbine High School massacre. She's reported directly from the Persian Gulf during the Iraq War and conducted exclusive interviews with nationally known individuals and earning several Edward R. Murrow Awards and other accolades. Active in her community, Gail has been deeply involved with a variety of civic associations and organizations, including the Alzheimer's Association and the American Diabetes Association. Her recognition by the Northern Virginia Victims Coalition for the objective, fair, and compassionate portrayal of crime victims is a testament to her respect for all persons, no matter their situation. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I'm honored to ask my colleagues to join me in congratulating Gail Pennybacker upon her retirement from ABC7. Her dedication to making news reporting a reliable source of information has made her an institution in our community. While Gail's familiar face will be missed, we wish her only the best as she begins the next phase of her life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the memory of a great man, Mr. William Raspberry of Okolona, Mississippi, who died Tuesday at the age of 76. He was hired by the Washington Post straight out of the Army and worked his way up from teletype operator to the op-ed page. At the time, he was only one of a handful of nationally syndicated and widely read African-American columnists. And though Mr. Raspberry lived most of his life away from Mississippi, he never forgot Okolona. He devoted much of his time in retirement to the foundation that bears his name, that helped children from at-risk families be prepared for entrance into kindergarten. He was a model of how to talk about complicated and divisive issues in a respectful and civil tone. In fact, he once said, "Perhaps it was when I found myself trying to write in such a way that people who didn't agree with me would at least hear me. Then I found they were talking back to me in similarly civil tones, and it felt good." His attitude would be a model for all of us that debate public policy. William Raspberry was a fine man and a great Mississippian, and he will be missed. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every citizen deserves an equal opportunity to make it in America. Last week, I, along with Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer and other members of the Democratic caucus, unveiled a plan to jumpstart growth in the United States manufacturing industry and support job creation that we so desperately need. My bill, the Advancing Innovative Manufacturing Act of 2012, makes investments to spur innovation and increase the competitiveness of American manufacturers. In order for America to make it, we need to maintain the capacity to manufacture new and innovative products right here at home in America. To Make It in America agenda will do just that. And, Mr. Speaker, I would say let all of us face and focus on our responsibility to America's business and press ahead to make it all in America. Thank you. Yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute. Revised extended.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the privilege of meeting Shin Dong-yuk, the only known defector to escape from one of the many concentration camps operated by the communist government in North Korea. He was born in the camp and faced starvation, torture, and brainwashing on a routine basis, which is described in the book Escape from Camp 14. On the same day, the authorities executed both his brother and his mother in front of him for attempting to plan an escape. He knew nothing of the outside world, only living day to day, doing whatever was needed to survive. Heartbreakingly, this included informing the guards when he heard about his family's escape plan. Years later, a new prisoner came to the camp from Pyongyang, and Shen began to learn about the outside world, and then began to long to escape. By some estimates, as many as 200,000 people are held in the brutal gulags like Shen. As we negotiate with the gangster movement of North Korea over their nuclear weapons program, we cannot forget about these human rights atrocities perpetrated against millions of their own people. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maryland seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge us to reclaim the security that middle-class Americans have lost over the last decade. Beginning in 2001, Republicans passed trillions of dollars in tax cuts, primarily benefiting the wealthiest Americans. We were told these tax cuts would unleash a torrent of job creation and economic growth. That was baloney. It failed miserably. The wealthiest Americans experienced unprecedented gains, while middle-class families saw their budgets shrink in tandem with rising poverty and the slowest rate of job creation in half a century. Well, lesson learned. It's time to let the tax cuts for the wealthiest expire, but not at the expense of middle-class families. It's time to extend without delay or uncertainty tax cuts for all families, for all income, up to $250,000. If we don't, it'll be a disaster, and a tax hike will result for those middle-class families. Mr. Speaker, it's unacceptable, particularly when Republicans are holding these tax cuts hostage so that wealthy Americans continue to reap the benefits of a broken system that hasn't worked to the advantage of most Americans and has exploded our deficit. Lesson learned, let's not let tax cuts expire for people whose income is up to $250,000. And with that, I yield.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Warrington-Warwick Little League softball team for their victory over Minersville on Saturday in the state championship game in Pennsylvania. Our community can be proud to be represented by this group of young women as they compete for the regional title this week. As the father of 3 girls who are involved in our community, I understand the dedication required of the players and their families to achieve such a success. The team will head to Bristol, Connecticut today, where they will compete against state champions from 9 other states for the title. Congratulations to Coach Bidding, Coach Corso and Ruscio, and players Stephanie Androlio, Madison Bidding, Sophia Boggs, Megan Bradley, Lauren and Nicole Corso, Lauren Krim, Alexandra DeLeon, Sabrina DeBron, Caitlin Hammond, Alexis McConomy, Madeline McShane, Juliana Ruscio, and Cassie Underkoffler. Congratulations once again to everybody who took part in this historic run. We wish all the players and coaches and their parents the best. I'm proud and honored to see a local team go so far. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to extend my congratulations to the city of Morro Bay in my congressional district on the Central Coast of California. Last month, the city won the 2012 award for excellence in local governance for coastal and ocean management from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This award is for its groundbreaking work with other coastal communities in California, local fishermen, and the Nature Conservancy to preserve historic fishing activity and build long-term economic and environmental resiliency on California's Central Coast. Working together, these partners realized that Morro Bay and other small fishing communities are working waterfronts needed to respond to the changing conditions of their fisheries. This effort has not been easy, to be sure. But Morro Bay's leaders, who have faced huge obstacles in their efforts to try new approaches to fisheries management, were determined to make this work. And so it's great to see this recognition of their courage and their hard work to improve Morro Bay's leading industry. Again, I congratulate the city of Morro Bay and its innovative partners for earning this acknowledgement. And I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to say thank you to all those small business owners across America who've used their ingenuity, hard work, and tireless effort at great financial risk to build a business from the ground up. Americans know that jobs aren't created by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. We know that our country's greatest innovators succeed in our American free enterprise system because they pour their hearts and souls into their dreams, overcoming each obstacle placed in their way. In our current economy, Congress should be doing everything it can to minimize the burdens on these entrepreneurs. Yet day by day, new regulations, mandates, and taxes pile up and make it that much harder for these innovators to succeed and harder for them to create good jobs and grow the economy. Mr. Speaker, this morning, as thousands of small business owners rise at the crack of dawn once again to build on the American dream, we say thank you. It's their hard work and determination, and it's the tireless effort of every working American that has built the most prosperous nation the world has ever seen. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
The International AIDS Conference could not be returning to America at a better time. This year's conference could mark the turning point in the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Advances in research are finally allowing us to picture the possibility of a generation that is free from this disease. Despite great promise, there is still much to do. Now more than ever, America must remain committed to leading the fight against HIV/AIDS, combating the crisis right here at home and abroad. Our continued support is absolutely vital to developing new treatments and prevention techniques, including microbicides, as well as for finding a cure. The United States must continue to do everything we can to increase access to treatment for infected individuals around the globe, including the availability of life-saving drugs. Let this conference serve as a reminder of America's contribution to combating this epidemic and a rallying cry for why we can't turn back now. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
I rise today to ask the House for unanimous consent to speak for 1 minute and advise to extend my time.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the House Ag Committee reported out of committee a version of the House bill. I rise today to call for this important measure to be brought to the floor for a vote as soon as possible. Agriculture is the backbone of North Dakota's economy. Our great state leads the nation in 9 different commodities. And this farm bill takes into consideration unique things within our state and within many other states as it relates to agriculture and those commodities. Specifically, it implements a strong crop insurance program that would be so beneficial in times like these where we're facing severe drought in much of our nation. North Dakota's farmers and ranchers need the stability that this farm bill can bring, and it needs to be a long-term authorization. It's now's the time for the House to act. For farmers and ranchers across this country, now's the time to ensure that we act on this important piece of legislation and get it reauthorized for the long term. The time for the Farm Bill is now. Thank you, and with that, I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentleman. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Permission to speak for 1 minute and revise and extend remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize Stunt, a new competitive team sport which focuses on the technical and athletic components of cheerleading, including stunts, basket tosses, and tumbling. With more than 800,000 cheerleaders in the United States, USA Cheer created this NCAA emerging sport to provide new opportunities for female athletes to compete at the high school and collegiate level while still allowing traditional cheerleading to remain a vital and important part of the school's spirit program. There are 22 colleges that have already participated in the national championships, with this number poised to expand significantly by next year. As co-chairman of the Congressional Caucus on Youth Sports, it is my distinct pleasure to highlight the success of Stunt and to commend the inaugural players of this sport. Your pioneering efforts will inspire and generate excitement amongst the next generation of potential stunt athletes. May God bless you for your efforts to involve more young female athletes in healthy physical activities and sport. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California? So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge the President to sign the Veterans Jobs Act. This body has a duty to make sure that every veteran, our brave men and women that are returning home, at 200,000 leaving active duty every year, to ensure that they actually have jobs available to them and that they're actually certified to be able to accept those jobs. We invest billions of dollars every year to give the best training in the world to our young men and women that are serving our country. Yet when they leave active duty, most times they're not certified for the very jobs that they're trying to get. Our brave men and women deserve the opportunity to jump right into these fields. Why should they have to get 2 or 3 extra years of training to duplicate the training they already have that is oftentimes much better training that they had on active duty? We have a duty to pass this bill, to have it signed into law, and to not let a day go by that these veterans return home and make sure that they've got the certification to immediately enter our workforce. I urge the President once again to sign this important legislation that both bodies have passed now on a bipartisan level, and I yield back.
Gentleman, time is expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the first time in more than 2 decades, the United States will host the International AIDS Conference, the 19th International AIDS Conference, drawing over 20,000 people from around the world to our nation's capital. Having participated in every conference since I was first elected to Congress in 1998, I knew we could not bring the conference back to the United States until the discriminatory immigration ban on people living with HIV was lifted. In 2007, I introduced a bill to repeal the ban. Few believed it could be done, but through bipartisan support, we achieved this goal, and I want to thank members who are still here for their support in that effort. This week, the return of the conference is an important opportunity to shine a global spotlight on the fight against AIDS in the African American community and communities of color, and a national spotlight on the ongoing global epidemic. Yesterday, I introduced new legislation to do just that. Ending the HIV/AIDS Epidemic Act articulates a policy and financing framework to achieve an AIDS-free generation in the United States and abroad. I urge all of my colleagues to support it so that we can begin to bring an end to AIDS here at home and around the world. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Funding the military is imperative, and supporting our troops at home and abroad is fundamental. But overfunding it at the expense of vital domestic programs is irresponsible. The Defense Appropriation Bill is $8 billion more than the agreed-upon level set by the Budget Control Act. This means that real programs in our home districts, which many of our constituents rely on, will be cut or go unfunded. Every family in this nation knows what it is to make a budget and the reasons behind needing it. This bill blatantly ignores the need and purpose of a budget. Certain aspects of this bill are hundreds of millions of dollars above requested levels. If a family tried to live like that, they would be in dire straits. Designating money when it is above and beyond what is needed is nothing more than a gratuitous earmark. Now, I am in favor of earmarks. I'm just not in favor of trying to trick the public. I believe that earmarks are right. It is our constitutional responsibility as members of the House. But tricking the public by adding $8 billion more is obscene.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Speaker, we should address the House for 1 minute and revise it extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At a time when the Republican majority has, in another wasted effort, repealed health care reform for the 33rd time, at a time when we will not see on this floor a vote to extend tax cuts for the middle class, now the Republican majority is planning to literally take food out of the mouths of families and children by cutting $16.5 billion from the SNAP program in the Farm Bill. This represents 45% of all the cuts, immediately cuts 3 million families and children from the program, and this is at a time when 1 in 7 Americans' families depend on some supplemental food assistance. But as the Republican majority fiddles away, we know that there is a crisis. 58% of all food bank clients currently receiving SNAP benefits need assistance from them. The resulting demand to food banks will put additional pressure on our communities and on families. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the further consideration of H.R. 5856, and that I may include tabular material on the same.
Action. Pursuant to House Resolution 717 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 5856. Will the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, kindly take the chair?
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the further consideration of H.R. 5856, which the clerk will report by title.
Making appropriations for the Department of Defense for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2013, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose on Wednesday, July 18, 2012, the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, had been disposed of, and the bill had been read through page 153, line 15. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. King of Iowa. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section. Section, none of the funds made available by this Act may be used in contravention of Section 7 of Title I, United States Code.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the DOMA limitation amendment. We've seen this last year where it passed out of the House of Representatives with a substantial vote. And it says, as it reads, that none of the funds made available by this Act may be used in contravention of the Defense of Marriage Act, which passed here in this Congress in 1996. And what we've seen since the passage of the Defense of Marriage Act is it is an effort on the part of the executive branch to undermine, I believe, marriage between one man and one woman within our military ranks. We saw the President of the United States make some statements along the way that his position was evolving on marriage. That seemed to be a signal to the Department of Defense, who issued 2 memorandum. One of them on September 21st, the Secretary of Defense memorandum that identifies facilities, and it says that the facilities, our military facilities, should be made on the use of them should be made on a sexual orientation neutral basis. That's a signal that says same-sex marriages on U.S. military bases and U.S. facilities. Second memorandum came 9 days later to our military chaplains, and it says a military chaplain may officiate any private ceremony on or off a military installation. That's not just permission, that's an implied encouragement to conduct same-sex marriages on our military bases conducted by our chaplains, who are presumably all under the payroll of the United States government. This same-sex marriage that has been taking place on our military bases, where otherwise legal around the world, contravenes the Defense of Marriage Act. The Defense of Marriage Act means this. Marriage actually says specifically this. Marriage means only a legal union between one man and one woman as husband and wife, and the word spouse refers only to a person of the opposite sex who is a husband or a wife. Pretty simple statute being contravened by the directives of the President of the United States as exercised through the Secretary of Defense. And I would point out that the President has demonstrated disrespect for the Constitution and the rule of law on multiple occasions. I just came from the Judiciary Committee where I reminded Secretary Napolitano of the same thing. When Congress directs and acts within the authority of Article 1 of the Constitution, our legislative authority, and the President of the United States or his executives who are empowered by him seek to undermine the law of the United States, instead of coming here to this Congress and asking for the law to be changed, or simply accept the idea that they've given an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law, and to take care under Article 2, Section 3, that the laws be faithfully executed. That's not happening, Mr. Chairman, and this amendment prohibits the use of military facilities or the pay of military chaplains to being used to contravene the Defense of Marriage Act. That act is something that the President has now stepped out and said that he supports same-sex marriage in the United States. That is apparently the most recent evolution of his position. But an evolving position by the President of the United States cannot be allowed to contravene the will of the people of the United States as expressed through the statutes in the United States as signed by the previous President Bill Clinton in September of 1996. And so I urge the adoption of this amendment. It prohibits the utilization of any of these funds that are in the Defense Appropriations Bill to be used to contravene the Defense of Marriage Act, and I urge its adoption, and I would yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
I rise to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in strong opposition to the amendment. This amendment is being offered for purely political reasons. As the gentleman knows, the Defense of Marriage Act is already current law. Despite the successful repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell last year under DOMA, same-sex military spouses are not entitled to the same benefits as other married couples. This amendment only seeks to divide this House. He knows that current law already prohibits same-sex spouses from independently shopping at military commissaries, using base gyms, or benefiting from subsidized dental and health care. I do believe we should have the debate on the effects of DOMA on our service members and their families, but introducing this contentious and discriminatory amendment to the bill is not the place. I urge my colleagues to oppose this divisive amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
I rise to support the amendment. The gentleman has explained it very thoroughly, easy to understand. The House has spoken many, many times strongly on the issue, and so I would advise my support for the King Amendment. I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 60.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Lee of California. At the end of the bill, before the short title, add the following new section. Funds made available by this Act for operations of the armed forces.
Consent that the amendment be considered as read and printed in the record.
Is there objection?
Mr.
Without objection, so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentlelady's amendment.
Point of order is reserved. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is straightforward. It would put a responsible end to combat operations in Afghanistan by limiting funding to the safe and orderly withdrawal of United States troops and military contractors. 11 years after Congress wrote a blank check for War Without End, which I could not support, the United States is still in Afghanistan. Ever since that vote, I have introduced this Lee Amendment to responsibly and safely bring our troops home on numerous occasions and at every opportunity. It is past time that Congress catch up, have the debate, and pass this amendment. Today, we have the opportunity to stand squarely with the war-weary American people who want to bring our troops home. It is clear that the American people have been far ahead of Congress in supporting an end to the war in Afghanistan. The call has been growing across this land to bring this war to an end, and it is past time for Congress to answer that call. After over a decade of war and over $500 billion in direct costs, not a penny of it, mind you, paid for, and we talk about deficit reduction, when we should have been actually investing in jobs in our economy here at home, it is really time now to say enough is enough. It is crucial to our economy and the future of this country that we stop pouring billions on a counterproductive military presence in Afghanistan. It is no wonder that 7 out of 10 Americans oppose the war in Afghanistan. The American people have made it clear that the war should end. It should not go on for another year, nor 2 years, and surely not for another decade or more. Mr. Chair, the costs of the war are unacceptable, particularly when we ask what we gain by keeping our troops in Afghanistan through 2014. The war in Afghanistan has already taken the lives of over 2,000 soldiers, injured tens of thousands more, and drained our treasury of over $500 billion. And these costs will only go up as we spend trillions of dollars on long-term care for our veterans, which of course we must do. As the daughter of a military veteran, I know firsthand the sacrifices and the commitment involved with defending our nation. But the truth is, our troops have been put in an impossible situation. There is no military solution, and it's past time to end the war and bring our troops home. And quite frankly, it's time to use these savings from ending the war to create jobs here at home. We need to provide for the health care and economic security of our returning troops by rebuilding the American economy. The American people have made it clear that the war should end. Not an extra day, not an extra dollar should be spent extending the decade-long war in Afghanistan. After 11 long years now, it's time to bring our troops home. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing law and constitute legislation in an appropriations bill and therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule states in pertinent part, an amendment to a general appropriations bill shall not be in order if changing existing law. The amendment gives affirmative direction in effect, and so I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Does any member wish to be heard on the point of order? If not, the chair will rule.
Questions on the amendment?
The chair finds that this amendment includes language imparting direction on the expenditure of funds. The amendment therefore constitutes legislation in violation of Clause 2 of Rule 21. The point of order is sustained and the amendment is not in order. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I do so to make just a very brief announcement. It has always been my policy when presenting the Defense Appropriations Bill for years and years in the past that if any amendment is out of order and is subject to a point of order, that I will allow the introducer of that amendment at least the 5 minutes to discuss the amendment before raising the point of order. And I hope we can do that today and expedite. I would like to move this bill a little quicker than maybe we had anticipated. So I just make that announcement. We will continue to allow you to have, on a point of order, continue to have your debate time before raising the point of order. But I would hope that everybody would be respectful of the time. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Purposes, the gentleman from Arizona rise.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona. At the end of the bill, before the short title, add the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be obligated or expended for assistance to the following entities. 1. The government of Iran. 2. The government of Syria. 3. Hamas. 4. Hezbollah. 5, the Muslim Brotherhood.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of my amendment to H.R. 5856, the Department of Defense Appropriation Act of the fiscal year 2013. The amendment seeks to halt any potential Department of Defense funding from being used to aid states and organizations that pose real threats to the international community. My amendment is simple. It prohibits any DoD funds from being spent on the governments of Iran, the government of Syria, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and Hezbollah. The cases against each of these organizations are well documented. Each of them has either sponsored terror activities, performed terror activities, made threats of terror activities, or engaged in atrocious human rights violations. None of these organizations are particularly friendly to the United States, and each of them harbor hate towards our friend and ally, Israel. Further, I know that some make the argument that sometimes foreign aid eases diplomatic relations and certain entities. While I do not discount that theorem, I do not believe that the United States should be dispersing any funding to any entity that promotes terror and violence. And to that I say trust is a series of promises kept, and that we need to start with upholding good behavior, and that is by honoring previous promises. This amendment is almost exactly the same as the amendment I offered to the last DoD appropriations bill, only that this amendment has included Damascus due to the al-Assad regime's terrible atrocities of late. That amendment was adopted by voice vote to the House of Representatives. I ask my colleagues to give my revised amendment the same unanimous approval as last time. In the words of the old American adage, we do not negotiate with terrorists. I thank the chairman and the committee for their work, and I urge an A vote on my amendment, and with that I yield back the balance of my time. I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I'd just like to advise him that our side of the committee especially enthusiastically endorses your amendment.
I appreciate the chairman.
Gentleman yields back.